centuries, the world has looked upon Africa as a thief looks upon treasure. It is there to be plundered. Our forefathers were stolen in millions during the slave trade, and our minerals have fed the industries of the West. Our traditional cultures were suppressed, and their artifacts stolen to fill the museums of Europe and America. Our land was occupied by strangers, and our people confined to reserves. Kenya, now an independent African nation, was once meant to become something quite different. At the beginning of this century, the colonial tradition that had transformed North America, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa into European states was supposed to play itself out once more, this time in East Africa. Kenya, in other words, was meant to become a white man's country. Harry Thuku, one of Kenya's first political leaders, died of cancer in 1970. He belonged to a generation whose life spans the entire colonial period in East Africa, from the end of the 19th century to the decade of independence in the 1960s. It is a generation which remembers the first white men to settle in Kenya, the first confrontations with colonial rule, and the long struggle for freedom which followed. A few years before this generation was born, the imperial powers of Europe had already determined its destiny. In the 1880s, Britain, Germany, France, and others divided Africa into spheres of European influence and set about establishing control over peoples and territories they hardly knew existed. In 1895, Britain declared a protectorate over East Africa. At about the same time, the generation which mourned Harry Thuku was born. Their lives are the history of colonialism in Africa.
Arungwa shomo kire Cambridge na moimaga na mambazai mokaga mariaguri mariendia abiashara makendia mirenge.
The white men first came from the coast as buyers and dealers. They sold blankets, bracelets, beads and calico sheets, and they bought elephant tusks in return. But they were not fighting. They were accompanied by armed guards, but fought only if provoked. Their main purpose, really, was trade.
maguraga mendagia indo icio ciao.
In 1890, the Imperial British East Africa Company, a private trading company, sent its first expedition through Kenya, led by Captain Frederick Lugard. The treaties and trading centers which Lugard established were the opening gambit in the process of colonization. 10th October, 1890. Wayaki Wahinga, local chief of Wakikuyu, having made blood brotherhood with Captain Lugard, understands by these formalities that he is the sworn friend and ally of the British, that he will supply them with food, that they are free to settle in his land and will never be molested. The British, on their part, will do him no harm. When we first saw white people, they looked to us like premature children. It was taboo to see such things, and we had to undergo a cleansing ceremony. A ram was slaughtered, and its intestines spread on both sides of a river. We had to pass over the intestines to prevent taboo. Lugard went on to Uganda, to the west. The situation behind him deteriorated. In London, the Imperial British East Africa Company found itself in a financial crisis and directed its agents in the field to become self-sufficient. The deliberate and wide-scale confiscation of crops and animals began without regard for ownership or human life. By the time Lugard returned to Kenya, 2 years later, blood brotherhood had been forgotten. August 1892. Our British policy of bringing peace and prosperity to Africa instead of war seems falling to pieces. The company fighting in Kikuyu, and now among the peaceful and friendly Wakamba. Perkis firing on and killing the Maasai, and Captain Nelson has hammered the peaceful and harmless Wataita, and killed many and hung some on trees. Such is our vaunted peace for Africa. From the letters of Sir Gerald Portal, 3rd February 1893. By refusing to pay for things, by raiding, looting, swashbuckling and shooting natives, the Imperial British East Africa Company has turned the whole country against the white man. Shortly afterwards, Chief Wayaki was captured in a struggle with some company men. The first in a long line of political prisoners, Wayaki died mysteriously on his way to exile.
Reu, thutha magĩikara